Hello, everyone. I'm Caleb Steele, and I will be sharing a little bit of information about real-world education today. Now, real-world education is basically teaching things that will have an impact on students in the future in the classroom. So it's not just teaching concepts or head knowledge, it's actually helping students to develop skills for later use in life. A couple of issues are modern education relies on a variety of different sources. This is actually a good issue for us as educators because drawing on a bunch of different sources for educating students helps to produce a well-rounded citizen. And the only problem we run into is when we try to teach with just lecture or just out of a textbook or something. While those are both good and they have their places, we need to focus more on having a variety of different sources. And that's part of what real world education is about, actually implementing some real life into the classroom and adding onto the list of sources for teaching. Issue number 2 is students often face barriers to learning. Sometimes students can have difficulties in their homes or with their families, and so when they come to class, they aren't engaged in the material. And I think that teaching about real life through real world education, things that will actually make sense to these kids who might not be engaged in the concepts and the facts, just helping them to be better prepared for later in life. I think that's a really good idea. A trend is real world education is unfortunately not being taught enough. While some teachers have started to implement real world education in their classrooms, the fact is it's not really happening that much. And that's basically that trend. It's just not being taught enough. The trend number 2 is, fortunately, we are moving towards accepting PBL, which is project-based learning, and that's a critical part of real-world education. And we're moving towards accepting it, and that is good because I think that's where education is heading anyways. So if we can move toward accepting it faster and helping kids to graduate eventually with more than just head knowledge, I think we're in a good spot. Some ways to support real world education. We have, there's one that seems glaringly obvious, but just be real when you teach. You just teach real life. Imagine for elementary or middle school age kids learning about different types of animals, like species, diet, and so forth. For those animals, imagine if we took them on a field trip to a working farm and they could actually see some of the animals they're studying, and they can actually gain a better understanding and a firsthand experience about those animals. For instance, like learning about a cow ruminating. If you just learn about it in the classroom, it's not going to stick with you that much. But if you're trying to study the digestive processes of a cow, it makes a lot more sense to go and actually see the cow and actually see it ruminating. That'll actually stick with you. So the important thing is to make learning about real life and not a concept that's hard to picture being used outside of a classroom. A teaching integration strategy is, unfortunately, we can't always go on field trips to farms or zoos or whatever. But we just bring the real world into the classroom. For instance, say that the students in Mr. Anderson's science class are learning about reptiles, but the kids are having a hard time retaining the information about a snake's anatomy. Their retention of the information will be much greater if the kids can actually see a live snake, learn how to handle them, learn which ones are venomous, and so forth. It just makes so much more sense to do all that we can to make learning in school something that students will actually use someday. Here are a couple apps, Zooniverse and Poplet, and here is a web tool, MyHistro. And Zooniverse is basically just a app where students can sort through thousands of pictures of nature and space, and to try to find the ones that are most relevant to the scientists in that field. Poplet is a app that kids can use to visually piece together information from classes in a way that makes it easier to understand. And MyHistro is a web tool that enables teachers to create timelines with video, text, and so forth, so that kids can better understand past history and how to be agents of change in the future. And the impact is, I personally will definitely try to use real world education in my classroom because, as I mentioned before, I think this is where education is heading. I think that we need to better prepare our students for the real world instead of just focusing on head knowledge. And I think that if we do that now, we can have a much greater impact on the future.